Hello, and welcome to a new week in our Django class. This week is action-packed. So last week was a non-trivial bit of work. You had to get a lot of stuff working with sort of increasingly DIY slash vague instructions. And this week, we're going to add a bunch of new stuff. From now on, it's going to move pretty quickly. We're going to learn a whole new JavaScript language. Now, hopefully it won't take you as long to learn JavaScript as it did to learn Python, partly because we lean on Python a lot. So I'm going to try to teach you this language in literally 60 minutes. And so if you know JavaScript, then you can probably skip that part. You might want to always watch the object-oriented approach. I got 20 minutes of JavaScript object orientation. That's because it's similar and different to Python. In some ways, it's more elegant, and it's a bit more subtle. A lot of people do really like the JavaScript's object-oriented programming. There is an all-important walkthrough, right? Because this assignment, like all the rest of the assignments, is about looking at sample code, figuring out the piece of sample code, and pulling it in and adapting that piece. The biggest mistake that you can make is that you spent all last week getting the ads assignment working, and now you break it because you took too much code. And then you have to go back and redo the ads assignment. So just be careful. Know what you're pasting. If you're selecting an entire page and pasting it, you're probably doing the wrong thing this week. So you got to cut and paste very, very carefully. And that's what the walkthrough is trying to tell you what to do. Is like, watch the walkthrough, have the code up, figure out where things are at in the pix sample code. And you got to find the blocks. You'll have to bring it in and then change it. But the key thing is if you do it right, you'll be just adding a little bit in the middle of the code that you've already got working. And if you're behind, you kind of have to catch up. So let me do a quick walkthrough on the ads application, because you're probably going to need some new debugging techniques, because there's errors that happen as your application is trying to retrieve pictures. And if those errors happen, they don't show up the same way. And so it's nice to know how to debug those. And so again, I show that in the walkthrough. But there's some new techniques for debugging code in the browser. So take a look at this. So here we are looking at the sample code for uploading the pictures. So let's go ahead and look at the differences between the last one. If we create the ad, everything looks the same. This is an essential part of this. You got to keep it working. You can't just go drop in how the sample code works. It's got to have a title, price, text. So rugby 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. And then you got to have this file. So let's go ahead and grab a file and go back up here and go to the rugby file. And it's got some code to test the size of the file. And so then we're going to send this in. Now, the other thing that you got to do is you got to notice that someone else logged into this recently, probably ran the auto grader. I don't own this ad, right? So you see, I don't have edit and delete. The auto grader checks that, right? So the edit's got to work, and that means you got to be able to put a new picture in. I'm going to cancel for now. Delete's got to work. Everything's got to work that worked before. And so then if I look at rugby, you see that it's pretty much the same as it was, except now I have this picture here. And then there's some JavaScript that makes it so that pops up. And if I click again, it goes away. Click again, pop up. Now, I was talking about the final exam, right? At some point, you want to be able to figure out, let's see, you want to figure out things like, I think I'll just view source on this because it's a little easier there with me. So if I take a view page source and I look at the code, and so you see here, I mean, you've got that's the menu, the whole menu, that you got to keep going there. This overlay, that overlay is the big picture, but it's currently got a style, a display of it's not currently displayed. So if you look, where is it? Style, blah, 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 blah. Where is it saying display is none? Oh, class equals overlay. I use class equals overlay.
and then some here when I say overlay, that gives it a position, and it says display as none, right? I mean, you gotta, this is like going back to CSS, etc. So that is the overlay. The overlay is there, it's just not shown. And then I've got a little tiny baby image, which has been floated to the right. That's this little baby image floated to the right. And it's got some JavaScript code here. There's not a ton of JavaScript in this, although there's other JavaScript that you got to put into the add thing to check the files. And so, so if let's inspect this, right? And so you see that. So right now, this particular thing is shown, but if I look at this one is not shown. Okay, but if I can show the overlay, and this is a thing about editing the document object model. This is this is not the web page. When I was doing the view source, that was what came back from the server, but I'm editing the document object model. It looks like HTML, but it's really document object model. So if I say block, then that shows up. And if I change this to none, so we're seeing an example of JavaScript changing CSS. And so that's what's going on here. And so it's not too much. It really is, you got to go edit a bunch of things, a bunch of files, and make pictures work. And pictures didn't work in the previous one, but you got to keep everything else running that was running before.
So there's a lot to learn this week. And in a final analysis, the amount of code that you have to write is kind of small. So it's worth taking your time and not messing up your existing code. You were copying and pasting a lot more stuff last week than this week. Now you're just bringing little pieces across, okay? So take your time and be careful. And you sort of see that we're in the middle of the rest of the semester, right? So we learned how to do login and multi-user applications, and now we're going to do images and applications, and then we're going to do JavaScript. And you'll notice in some of the assignments, it has this optional stuff like social login and favicon. Those are optional, but eventually I'm going to want you to actually do those in your assignments. We still have many-to-many data models and AJAX and JSON web services to do. And so I just like to remind you about the final exam. It's going to be during the final exam period, which is 2 days after the end of the class, but you can take it anytime during that period. Okay? So welcome to this week. I think it's kind of fun to get pictures working in an application. There are very few applications that don't need to store and retrieve pictures, even if it's as simple as a little picture of a profile for a person. So again, I hope you have fun with this assignment.